Welcome in to the Rock Talk Studio, where rock and roll books and documentaries are reviewed, previewed, and most importantly, recommended. And today is a culmination of all the episodes I did last year. This is the episode that will leave you with the best recommendations of 2024, as this is the second annual Rock Talk Studio Awards Show. I'm your host, Big Rick. Let's plug in and kick off the last show of 2024. All right, it's time to give out some awards. Today is about the best of the best. I'll leave you with a bunch of great recommendations and things for you to check out. I'm going to start out with books, and we're going to start with the best book about a band. And that award goes to, the name of this band is REM, the book by Peter Ames Carlin, and true magic was worked here as Carlin came up with an absolutely engaging way to weave the four band members' personal stories into the broader presentation about REM. His writing just made you feel like you were right there, and REM's humble beginnings was a great way to get a good feel about the four members of this group and their untraditional rise to just crazy stardom. This band ruled the college scene for years, and the book documents how they did it. A lot of the story centers around their commitment to staying grassroots and not doing what the record label wanted them to do, until they dipped their toe into trying a few new things, which, and this is where the great research and presentations of this book really shines through, because REM just exploded and was a mainstay of rock radio at the time, and even MTV they were so popular on. Absolutely great look at how this band came up, about why they are admired by so many. This really captured the spirit of the band, and that's why it's the best book about a band. The award winner for 2024, the name of this band is REM by Peter Ames Carlin. What about just a band member? Who wrote the best book about that? And here comes kind of the first curveball of the awards, because this book could have easily won the best book about a band, but it's going to go to the best book about a band member. It sits on the edge of both of these categories, and because it's so deep and written with such personality, I've decided to go with it. The best book about a band member goes to My Effin' Life by Geddy Lee, his memoir. And with writing his memoir, Geddy Lee of Rush crafted a beautiful story, not only about his life and family, but about his two best friends, Alex and Neil, and the band they formed and grinded with for years before Rush became a rock institution. So in some ways, you get the best of both worlds here. This is a band member's view of what it was like inside this brotherhood, and that is definitely one of the strengths of this book. Geddy doesn't hold back, especially about himself, but also about Rush and what it was like to be so close to two other guys for so long, and then to lose one with the passing of drummer Neil Peart. Geddy has a great personality and a love for music that comes through in the pages, and has taken this memoir and expanded it into a very memorable read. The best book about a band member in 2024 goes to My Effin' Life, the Geddy Lee memoir. Two more book awards I'm going to give out today, and then I'm going to give the Best Book of the Year award out. And this award goes to a book that's not about a band or not about a band member, and it's really cool because of that. It is about a place, and that's a place in Asbury Park known as the Stone Pony. And the winner of the best book not about a band or a band member goes to I Don't Want to Go Home, The Oral History of the Stone Pony by Nick Corasaniti. What a really cool concept this book has. It takes a bunch of musicians, of course, Bruce Springsteen's in there, and we'll talk about him in a second, and then also mirrors it with a bunch of the people that were kind of in the back end at the Stone Pony. So you've got quotes and interviews with bartenders, barmaids, bouncers, owners of the club, the three owners of the club, local politicians, DJs, combines it with great list of musicians, starting with Bruce Springsteen. Springsteen wrote the foreword to the book, and he's the last one quoted in the book for a reason. This is the house that Bruce built. Stone Pony wouldn't be what it is today without Bruce, but it's not just a Springsteen book. Little Steven And Southside Johnny had so much to do with the beginning of this story and bringing the Stone Pony to life. But then it expands in a lot of different directions. Zach Wilde talks about how he learned how to play guitar from going to Stone Pony shows. Patti Smith fell in love with the club, and so did her mother, who had a box seat, who would come to the shows. John Bon Jovi used to play shows there when he was underage. There's so much depth to this story, and there's so much to the story. This is a great book. Best book not about a band or a band member. I Don't Want to Go Home, The Oral History of the Stone Pony. All right, this next book award is one of my favorite categories, and it's a award I give out to the book that I learned the most from, the one that kind of surprised me, that I didn't know a lot about, or I was expecting something else, and it just kind of changed my mind. And the winner of the best book that I learned the most from goes to Soul Serenade, King Curtis and His Immortal Saxophone by Timothy Hoover. And this book just really took me by surprise, and it left me with a ton of admiration, not only for the author who worked on this book for 20 years, but also his subject matter, King Curtis. First of all, King Curtis's rock and roll resume is crazy. He played with Buddy Holly. He opened for the Beatles at Shea Stadium. He also went on the road and opened the rest of that historic Beatles tour. He played on a John Lennon record. A guy named Jimi Hendrix played in his band. Yes, that Jimi Hendrix. And Hoover does an amazing job of presenting Curtis's extremely engaging story. I was blown away about how good this was and how much I learned, especially how I gathered a whole new respect for King Curtis. He talks a lot to family members and to friends, and it's really a holistic story, and it's done so well. Like I mentioned, 20 years dedicated to a project. It comes through in the pages. Really cool book. I highly recommend you checking this one out. Soul Serenade, King Curtis and His Immortal Saxophone, the winner of the book that I learned the most from in 2024. All right, I'm going to take a quick break and then get back with the awards for all those great rock and roll documentaries that came out last year. Let me tell you a little about something I've added to the podcast, and that is the monthly blast. The blast is kind of a pseudo newsletter. I'm not really calling it an official newsletter because it's not that long. That's not my intention. I want it to be a quick read. It's about 4 or 5 minutes, and my goal is to give you something that summarizes what the podcast does, but while giving you a broader look at the world of rock and roll books and docs. So on the last Friday of the month, you get the current list of the top 5 books and documentaries, updates on all new projects, and already there are a ton of great new releases coming in 2025. There's a new Zeppelin documentary. Finally, this has been in the works for a long time. It seems like forever. It's called Becoming Led Zeppelin. That's coming out. Peter Wolf of the J. Giles Band's got a memoir that's set to come out in March, as does Mike Campbell of the Heartbreakers. There's an Iron Maiden documentary coming, a new Cheap Trick book I'm reading. I just saw a real interesting Phil Collins doc. I just got a new Lollapalooza oral history. So many great projects are heading your way. And all you have to do to catch up on them is email me at info@rocktalkstudio.com. That's info@rocktalkstudio.com. And that gets you on the list for the monthly blast. And that is also how you get a chance to win a top 5 book of 2024. Any member of the Rock Talk Studio Blast gets an instant entry into the drawing for Robin Hitchcock's fantastic memoir, 1967, How I Got There and Why I Never Left. Last month, I gave away the new Rush book, Rush at 50. And in January, I will draw a blast winner for the new Hitchcock memoir. Shoot me an email and join the blast. It's time for the best of the best in the world of rock and roll documentaries. And let's start off with the first doc I'm going to give an award to for Best Documentary About a Band, and that goes to Learning to Live Together, The Return of Mad Dogs and Englishmen. It's directed by Jesse Lauder, who does an incredible job at balancing and weaving 3 powerful stories: the original Joe Cocker and the Mad Dogs and Englishmen concert, which was in 1970, the reunion show, which was in 2015, that Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi of the Tedeschi Trucks Band put together, and a history lesson kind of update on what happened to the various artists of the Mad Dogs band during and since. And not only does it capture all the great energy and performances of this tribute show from the Lock-In Festival in 2015, but it also sheds a ton of new light on that famous Mad Dogs band. The use of original footage from the 1970 Joe Cocker and Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour in all its grainy glory just puts you right in the middle of this giant party and really shows the depth of that band. The archival footage is top notch. There were some really outstanding moments captured here, and it's mixed with a ton of great music and some pretty heavy drama too. The story of the Mad Dogs tour is captivating in and all by itself. And that original Joe Cocker and the Mad Dogs and Englishmen documentary, that's one of the greatest rock and roll films of all times. This doc has so much going for it, and it also is great to have the last interview ever recorded with Leon Russell here in this, and Russell does some fantastic playing that is captured in rehearsals. I think his version of the Ballad of the Mad Dogs and Englishmen steals the show. Tremendous documentary. Last 20 minutes of it is all live from the reunion show. Really cool. One caveat to this, it's only streaming on the Criterion channel. People ask about this documentary more than any other doc I talk about it. The only way to get it is to sign up for the Criterion channel or sign up for the free 7 days and watch the best doc about a band learning to live together, the return of Mad Dogs and Englishmen. All right, now let's do a best documentary about a band member. And that goes to the documentary Disciple, Steven Van Zandt, the story of Steven Van Zandt. I love this doc because I guarantee you, you did not know how influential and accomplished a life Stevie Van Zandt has had. It's amazing the amount of things that he has done other than be in the E Street Band. Sure, that has a lot to his story, and also him being in Sopranos. Most people know him from that. But the amount of work he's done, the advocacy work he's done, the work he's done with other musicians, the work he's done for kids, his Underground Garage radio show, his Sirius FM show. I mean, this guy's resume just goes on and on and on. Really cool doc. And it features a lot of great live performances from his early solo years, a lot of stuff I haven't seen in many, many years. It's a well-rounded look at one of my favorite guys in rock and roll. It's kind of a visual version of his book, Unrequited Infatuations, which I did a review on way back, I think in episode number 2 or 3 when I started the podcast a couple of years ago. Great doc about a band member, Disciple, Stevie Van Zandt. One more documentary award to give away before I get into the best book of the year and the best documentary of the year. I'm going to give an award away now for the best rock and roll documentary not about a band or a band member, and that goes to Catching Fire, the Anita Pallenberg story. The doc is narrated by Scarlett Johansson, and the words she narrates are taken from the manuscript called Black Magic. This was an autobiography that Anita Pallenberg wrote, but never actually published. A lot of this doc is made up of interviews from people scattered throughout Anita's life, and along with the interviews are a ton of really interesting, in-depth home movies. Most of the home movies come from the 60s and 70s, so you get a kind of an older, spliced up, behind-the-scenes look at what her life really was like. And of course, you get the Rolling Stones, and the Stones stuff is just great. Pallenberg met the Stones in '65 when they were giving a concert in Munich and was really taken by Brian Jones and soon became involved with the Stone. They do a good job of presenting a close-up personal look at the kind of dark reality of their rocky and at times violent relationship. A large chunk of this doc is dedicated to this relationship and her following relationship, which was with Keith Richards. The amount of behind-the-scenes home movie stuff, I can't stress this enough, is pretty extensive. And you see Brian and Keith in a bunch of never-before-seen shots and environments. Keith's involvement in this really adds to the depth of the documentary. Very personal subjects looked at. Keith's son even participates in interviews. Pallenberg grew up during the Second World War, and she overcame so much. There was a time when she was pretty much in a league of her own. I mean, there's shots of her modeling and acting, and you just can't keep your eyes off her. A ton of people looked up to her. Gimme Shelter and you can't always get what you want were written with her as the inspiration. She was a force of nature, and this doc is a raw look of her success and her failures. Great documentary, best rock and roll documentary, not about a band or a band member catching fire, the Anita Pallenberg story. There's only 2 awards left to give out, and that is for the best book of 2024 and the best rock and roll documentary of 2024, and that is coming up next. Before I get into the best of the best of 2 best of the year, I just want to say that not only is this episode a culmination of all the work I put into the podcast last year, and one of my favorite episodes to do every year, it's a celebration of the kickoff of the 3rd year of the Rock Talk Studio podcast. And with that comes a ton of thank yous to everyone who's listened to the podcast. It means so much to me. To anyone who's signed up for the blast, to anyone who has supported me on social media. There are just too many people to thank here, but please know I really appreciate all of you and all the love you send my way this year, and I promise to keep delivering all the best I can in the world of rock and roll books and talks, a world I know a lot of us love. One last thing before getting to the Best Book and Doc of the Year awards. Because my episodes come out on Tuesday, and the next 2 Tuesdays are Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, I'm going to come back in January, and I'm going to come back strong and do something I've never done before with a podcast, and that is drop 2 shows in the same week. So the first week of January, January 7th, it will be the top 10 rock and roll books of 2024. And then 2 days later on Thursday, January 9th, it will be the top 10 documentaries of the year. So you'll get the total list of all my favorites for the year, the first week of January. Now it's time for the last 2 awards of the year, the best book and docs, and then I'll see you again next year. Okay, I think I'm going to start with the best book of the year. And the best book of the year award goes to Drums and Demons, The Tragic Journey of Jim Gordon by Joel Selvin. Renowned music critic Joel Selvin did just an incredible job with the way he was able to handle the very sensitive subject of mental health in this book, while also exposing the enormous talent of drummer Jim Gordon. I mean, Gordon was one of rock's greatest drummers. If you don't know his name, it's probably because he spent the last 30 years in a psychiatric prison. Gordon drummed for the famous LA studio players, the Wrecking Crew. He drummed on Beach Boys' Good Vibrations and played on Pet Sounds. He was the drummer on the Joe Cocker and Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour. He was the drummer in Derek and the Dominoes. The full list of Gordon's drumming accomplishments they're staggering. And this book takes you not only deep into Gordon's amazing career and charts out he was the go-to drummer in the late 60s and all through the 70s, but also into his harrowing battle with undiagnosed schizophrenia and the years of psychiatric treatment and recovery work. That, unfortunately, was all to no avail, as no one could help him. Selvin was able to work with Gordon's family after Jim died in prison to try and understand the daily challenges he faced and how the voices in his head, untreated, led him to killing his mother. It's one of rock's most jarring stories, and Selvin maneuvers the story around Gordon as he becomes increasingly unpredictable and delusional. The details that Selvin supplies of Jim Gordon's demise are heartbreaking. This book hits deep while not shying away from the truth of who Jim Gordon was and who he became after he was unable to control the demons in his head. Even though the subject matter is hard to handle at times, this is still amazing writing and an incredible book. The #1 rock and roll book of 2024, Drums and Demons, The Tragic Journey of Jim Gordon by Joel Selvin. Congratulations, the 2024 Book of the Year. One more award to go, one more award, and that final award is going to the best documentary of 2024. I love this documentary. I can't say enough about it. It's called Revival 69, the concert that rocked the world. How can a festival in Toronto in 1967 go from a non-event to all of a sudden the biggest thing in the world? This show It became Toronto's Woodstock. It's a multi-layered story with a ton of wild characters playing major parts throughout this absolutely fascinating documentary. Promoters John Brower and Ken Walker, they were just 23 years old at the time when they decided to put on this concert. So they started out with rounding up Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, Bo Diddley, and Gene Vincent. And then they added a couple of modern day acts, Alice Cooper, before the makeup and elaborate stage show, and The Doors as the headlining act. What an amazing, amazing lineup of artists. And this was the first concert that The Doors played after the Jim Morrison alleged incident of exposure and the arrest. Lacking money to properly fund the concert, they reached out to a local motorcycle gang for help. And that's not even the best part of the story, because a couple of weeks before the show, they weren't selling any tickets. And even with that amazing lineup, they didn't know what to do. So they threw one of a couple of Hail Marys in this documentary. And they reached out to Los Angeles for help and recruited LA's most popular DJ and scenester, Rodney Bingenheimer, and one of rock's most infamous managers and producers, the one and only Kim Fowley, to help them with promotion. And after storming every radio station, every record store, and everywhere in between, they were still coming up short. So what did they do? They said, hey, let's give John Lennon a call. And fresh off the breakup of the Beatles, and let's just see if John Lennon would want to MC the show. Lennon refused, but he did say he would come if they let him play. And you can imagine what that did for the ticket sales. It was the first time Lennon played live without the Beatles, and it's all captured here with the amazing video. I can't stress that enough. The live shots are incredible. The concert performance by all the acts get ample time, and they are extraordinary. Robbie Krieger of The Doors called Chuck Berry's performance one of the best rock shows he's ever seen. Bo Diddley said of the event and his set, I've never heard an audience scream or cheer for me like that, ever. It almost brought tears to my eyes. Alice Cooper said the Toronto Festival actually launched the band. I don't want to give away everything. There's a scene in here that shows and documents why Cooper's career took off after the show. Another cool thing about Alice, him and his band ended up being the backup band for Gene Vincent that day. There's so many incredible stories that went on in this documentary, and it's all done really, really well. 80 magnificent minutes, easily the Rock Talk Studio documentary of the year, Revival 69. The concert that rocked the world. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I love talking rock and roll. You know that I do, and especially when I can give you a bunch of great recommendations. And today, you got the best I have, the award-winning recommendations of 2024. Remember, the next show will be a 2-for-1. I'll see you the first week of January with the top 10 books episode, and then 2 days later, the top 10 docs of 2024. And in the immortal words of Al Green, love and happiness to you all in the coming new year.